met her face to face. Very nice. She's also a friend of Darlie Lynn's. And let me also say that it was Darlie Lynn that actually got the Innocence Project introduced to her. And Darlie Lynn clearly saved this woman's life by doing so. So just something I wanted to share. I thought that was wonderful news. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to get down to questions. So we're going to start at the top here because we've had quite a few questions come in. Some of us know more about things than others. Anybody has a question for anybody in particular on the panel, just, say, hey, Rich, hey, Danelle, hey, Anna, whoever, to ask the question. All right, so the first question listed is from Bathsheba. Bathsheba says, how do you think Robert Robertson's case will affect Darlie's case?
It won't.
Now, the best person to ask here might be Joni, because I know she follows that case carefully. And I think Joni had to step away for a moment.
I can take on that one for a minute.
Yeah, go ahead, Anna.
So I'll hand it back over if she pops back up. But basically, Robert Robertson, he was on the men's side of death row here in Texas, and he was charged with shaken baby syndrome. Again, they used some of his behavior after I believe it was his girlfriend's child, who was 2 years old, who passed away. At the airport, they found evidence that she had other underlying medical diagnoses going on and was possibly even in sepsis or going septic. And Robert Robertson was sent to death row based on shaken baby syndrome, which is actually very similar to kind of what Melissa Lucio, she went on death row for injuring a child. And so we believe that the new light that's being shed on not just Melissa Lucio, but Robert Robertson is really giving the Court of Criminal Appeals a run for their money and having them relook at cases. And I think it's kind of come
all
to
these
a
cases
tipping
are
point
individual.
where we've realized
They have
in this
nothing to
state
do
that
with
something
each
needs
other.
to be done because we have executed, unfortunately, innocent people here.
They have. I
And
agree.
so with Lucio, the Innocence Project working with her, and Robert Robertson seems to have a great defense team that came up with a late stage tactic to stay.
Lucio has a lot of different
so
things
he
that
will,
show that
yes,
she's
he,
innocent,
Bathsheba,
like the
you are
corrupt
correct. He came
prosecutor,
within 2
the ineffective
hours.
counsel, the kid saying that
That's got to
another
be
kid
very
pushed her
scary
down the
for him.
stairs.
So
It has nothing to do with Darlie's case.
lots of information. We'll keep you guys updated. We've been covering, me and Joni on Kitchen Table Research have been covering Robert Robertson and on our TikTok. So we'll keep you guys updated on that. But I think it's a really great thing that all of these cases in Texas are kind of coming up at the same time. That way,
Except for Darlie's. IP's had her case for 4 years.
Light will be shed on the wrongful conviction rate in death row here in the state of Texas.
Okay, so we got a question for Danelle from Bathsheba. I know Bathsheba. She's a great lady. She's actually been on my panel before, and she's always welcome here, and she knows that. So Bathsheba says, Danelle said in Texas that the IP is required to produce the actual killer in order for Darlie to be exonerated. Who do you believe the IP is focusing on?
I don't know that I actually said that verbatim. I think that is our best situation. I don't know if y'all can hear me or not.
You're cutting in and out a little bit.
Okay, I'm kind of in a bad area. It should be getting better, though. I don't know if I said that specifically, that we have to find the murderer in order to free Darlie. I do believe that is our best option, and that's what we want to do. Ultimately, our number one goal is to solve the crime, and by solving the crime, Darlie will be eliminated as the perpetrator and then freed kind of as a secondary achievement in the case. I've always kind of felt like it is more likely that this is a completely random person that we don't have any connection with or any previous interactions with, because we have had investigators like Rich that have dug into this case and done their very best. Although the police never really followed up on any leads, we have had our teams follow up on every lead that we have received. We've dug into every individual that we had any kind of contact with on a meaningful level. And we never seem to be able to find anything hard enough to really pin somebody with the murder or even to issue any kind of warrants for further investigation or whatever it might be. That is our goal, but that is not the only way Darlie could come home. There is other options out there. But yeah, ultimately that would be our number one goal. I don't have a specific person that I think is responsible. There is several theories though floating out there that I cannot eliminate.
Hey, Danelle, we have a quick question for you while we've got you. How is Darlie doing right now? Can you tell us about kind of what her mental state is after Melissa's, progress and everything like that? How is Darlie doing? Yeah.
It was a wonderful day for them the other day. I believe it was Wednesday when Darlie and Melissa had their meetings with Vanessa, and they both had really good information given to them. Darlie has a lot of stuff going on, so she's very hopeful. She stays very faithful, and her faith is her strongest suit right now. I think all the girls on death row are really cheering for Darlie and Melissa, and Melissa is really close to being exonerated, like officially exonerated. And that's a huge improvement from what we thought. We originally thought it was just going to be released, time served, and maybe a child neglect charge or failure to render aid kind of thing. But the judge signed off on all 5 claims of innocence, which is huge and really impressive. And if you look at that, that is 2 women on a death row of 7 women that have credible claims of innocence. And that should be terrifying for everyone.
Is the judge that signed off on Melissa's exoneration the same judge that's over? No. Okay. Didn't think
No,
so.
it's a different circuit altogether.
Oh, right. Yeah, because Darlie's out of Dallas and Melissa's out of Houston, I believe, or down in the LaGrange area in southern Texas. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so our next question is from Bathsheba as well. And Bathsheba's what I love about her. She loves to get information. So, she loves to hear good stuff about Darlie, of course, but she's always about finding out the truth. That's something I really like about her. She's a great lady, by the way. So I guess it's kind of pick your poison on this question. Maybe I can answer this one. She didn't address it to anybody in person, but Bathsheba said, she further stated that the Innocence Project has eliminated several suspects. Was Glenn Mize or someone acting on his behalf eliminated? Well, that's kind of a touchy subject right now. What I can say about the only thing I'm going to say about it is that it doesn't look very probable that Glenn Mize had involvement. That's really all I can go into that right now, Bathsheba. As soon as we can go into that further, you can bet the farm we're going to do that. So the next question we have is from Bathsheba again, which is addressed to me. And it's going to be another one of them touchy questions. She said, Rich, I know you covered this a few years ago, But who is Blake or Blakeney? And did he live next door, down the street, or did this guy have a record? In light of, you got to remember when I did investigative work on that individual, this was prior to the Innocence Project. I've given all my stuff to the Innocent Project for investigation, to Vanessa. At this time, I really can't comment on anybody that I found to be a suspect or anybody in interest to the case. But I can promise you this stuff will be carefully looked at. Okay,
Well, I
so
think like Danelle was kind of stating, we've dug into so many of these people. I think after all these years, if it was the next door neighbor, we would have figured that out by now. I do think that maybe it's going to come back to somebody that we just was never on our list.
all right, so John Wigner says, he misspelled a couple of things, but I think I know what he's trying to say. The J85, he believes belongs to the person who did it and hopefully will be found. It's more or less a statement rather than a question, but that's okay. So another question from Bathsheba. Do you guys think the IP is going to use the Texas junk? Who would like to answer that question?
Are you talking about the Texas junk science law?
Yes, of
I would
2013.
assume. Yeah, I would
Yes.
assume so.
Yes, I've looked at that. Go ahead and answer Danelle, and then I have some information on it as well.
I will just say that Texas is now considered the gold star for forensic science. They're the only state that has implemented the Board of Forensic Science that allows or limits what can be presented in a court of law in Texas. I know that the problem is that there's still precedents with certain things like blood spatter analysis or blood pattern analysis, whatever you want to refer to it as. It still is admissible in a court of law. Same with Robert Robertson having the shaken baby syndrome. That is still an approved diagnosis by the American Academy of Pediatrics. Nobody's ever been executed based on that diagnosis alone, but it has precedence, so they can present this stuff in a court of law. Now, does it hold weight in the general public's mind? Yes, because the general public does not know about these laws and they don't understand what junk science really means. So I think it's a very tricky area, and it is very much up to those presenting the case to ensure that the jury understands what the value is of every piece of evidence that's being presented, or the unvalue, I guess, of every topic that they're discussing.
Well, and just for everybody to know, I was going to say, I have a little bit of information, a script here that actually I was working on the other day. So obviously junk science is a term used to describe research, data, or analysis that is either fraudulent or spurious. It's often used in legal and political context. So it can include theories or methods presented as scientific fact without evidence or research. We know this happened in Darley's case. Oversimplifications of complex scientific findings. That's something that they do to confuse the jury, and the jury just gets bored and stops listening because they don't understand necessarily. Subjective methods that depend on individual interpretation. This also happened in Darley's case. Selective results. I felt like this also happened in Darley's case. They tested blood that knew that it was going to come back to them or come back to Darley at that time. Political motivated distortions of scientifically sound papers and publishing of non-reviewed journalists. So if you're an expert in forensics, you need to be peer reviewed. These studies need to have been gone through the scientific method. So Texas's junk science law passed in 2010 allows people to challenge their convictions if new scientific evidence shows that the evidence used against them was flawed. We know this happened in Darley's case. The scientific field has evolved in the last 30 years with DNA, and even like John's talking about with 85J and the fingerprints. New individual experts would have given a different opinion at trial based on new scientific standards. Do we think Tom Bevel would testify differently to this day if he was held to this law? The law was intended to address wrongful convictions based on faulty science. However, a 2024 report by the Texas Defender Service found that the law is not working as intended. The law systematically still fails to provide relief to innocent people convicted based on false forensic evidence, and the appeals court predominantly grants relief in DNA cases, giving less consideration to other types of false forensic evidence. So that's kind of the 2013. I just happened to have a script pulled up on it. I was going to do a video on that and how that reflects wrongful conviction, because as Danelle just stated, if 2 out of 7 women are wrongfully convicted on death row, I mean, that's what, 30%, or we did the math the other day.
Yeah, 28%.
28% of the women on death row are wrongfully convicted. That's a problem. That's a problem. Huge.
Yes.
Yeah, well, definitely one person is one too many, clearly.
Yes.
Well, I just feel like people don't understand it until it affects your family. Like,
Yes.
you don't ever think it's going to happen to you. Even when we just did our season finale and had Danelle on, I think a lot of people are so naive, and it doesn't matter which way you look at it. Oh, they hired an attorney. They're, they're guilty. You didn't hire an attorney, and then the court system screws you over. It's really a lose-lose for the defendant.
If I can add to that, there was something I never really realized until I checked this out for myself. And when I actually interviewed some of the children that played with Devin and Damon at the house in Rowlett at the Routier home and talked with them, and they were clearly, they didn't even really want to talk about it first off, but when they told me how this horrible tragedy terrified them as children, so I mean, the list of victims, it's not just going to be a mom and a dad or a sibling or, aunt or an uncle. It goes much more broad than that. And I guess I never really put that together back in the early days looking at this case. The amount of people that were affected was extremely large. Of course, Danelle's family is very, very large as well. It's a very large family. By the way, Danelle, Tracy's here, one of your mother's good friends, the truth. She's joining us here today. She's an awesome lady. I love Tracy.
She's got some great content on YouTube out here too, you guys.
Yeah, I would love to have Tracy come on the panel sometime. She's a very good advocate for Darlie Lynn. So the next question is, how's Darlie doing at the moment? And Steve-O89 is asking that question. That's also the Steve that has joined my panel in the past, who I'm sure will be joining it again in the future. Who would like to answer that question?
I probably can. I just talked to her Friday. She's doing really good. Like I said a little bit earlier, she's had a few really good conversations with Vanessa, discussing all of the things that are in process right now. There's been a few changes.
Why don't you go ahead and jump in, Joni? You said that you had some information.
This is just kind of an offside remark. I was reading through a court testimony where Barry Scheck, who is the founder of the Innocence Project, was on the stand somewhere in Louisiana, and they were asking him a lot about what can you use in this day and time, what can you use to solve a case? And he said, really, we're down to DNA. DNA is the gold standard. If you can't prove it with DNA, you can't prove it. And so he was actually talking about fingerprints and some of that kind of stuff. So the question about 85J, I don't know is going to end up relevant. I would love to see it solved with the DNA evidence, not the fingerprint evidence.
Well, that would also make it a lot easier too.
Absolutely. And it'd make
Yeah.
it more concrete, more real, more boundary
Indisputable.
driven.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think with Darley's case, it's going to end up being a combination of all of those things. You have stuff that's being tested right now that will potentially be very heavy for Darley's case, but if you can coordinate it with fingerprints and other evidence, it's indisputable.
Well,
Right.
and the fingerprints were important 30 years ago. You know, I don't think you can dismiss them. It's just interesting to see how it's evolved through the years and what we thought we knew and what we think we know, and that kind of stuff. So lots of good stuff.
Yep, advancement is huge. Yes, for sure.
And Danelle, if you could
Also,
answer,
can I just add that
of course,
you
go ahead,
also,
Sarah, go ahead.
well, we also you'd need a suspect to compare the bloody fingerprint to. So as you said, yes, it would be like a secondary thing to firstly apprehending the suspect,
Yes.
because a lot of people say, oh, it doesn't match, an intruder, but we haven't got an intruder to match it to in the first place. So you need someone to match it to. It's like DNA. It's like DNA. You need to match it to a sample, a known sample that you've got. In this case, we've got no known samples, no unknown fingerprint samples. All we've got is what they took, which was comparisons to Darley's, Darren's. They didn't take the boys' fingerprints. So basically, this is evidence that I believe, like Danelle said, will come into play once the perpetrator is found. Similarly, I think the palm print might be useful in that case. The palm print found on the inside of the window screen that Detective Frosch demonstrated at trial was left there upon entering the window screen each time that he went through. So, yeah, I believe that it's important evidence, but we need a suspect to compare it to. It's not Darley's.
And Tara, can you Mystery, can you, Mystery Maverick, can you kind of explain to us, like, why can't they just run 85J through APHIS, the fingerprint, or something like that? Can you explain why? Mm-hmm.
I believe because it's a partial. It's not a full fingerprint. And it depends on the amount of points. So even though you can make a comparison with points, so I could compare it against, say, Darley's fingerprints, for instance, I couldn't just put it in APHIS and get an exact match,
Right?
because those specific points may include hundreds of people.
Well, if I could jump in, we were talking about.
You also have the fact that maybe that person, even if you did manage to run it through APHIS, that person hasn't been arrested after that. Maybe they committed this crime, all hell broke loose. And that was like, on their conscience for the rest of their lives, and they didn't commit another crime. There's been crimes, like heinous crimes committed, and they find the perpetrator in the end was, top guy. He was a coach. He went on to, to be this upstanding citizen in the community, almost as if trying to you know, to sort of rid his past of that bad act that he'd carried out. So,
And that happened with BTK, by the way.
Yep.
But one
yeah,
more
and there's
thing
other
about the
cases
fingerprint.
also.
I'm sorry, Tara, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rich. Sorry.
Okay. No, don't be sorry.
tangent.
Just important information. Now, and I hate to bring this up, Danelle, but it's part of the case and it's true. Sadly, Devin and Damon were exhumed some years after they were buried. I believe it was in the year 2000, if I'm not mistaken, so that they could retrieve their fingerprints, which should have been taken at autopsy, and they were not. Their footprints were taken, but their fingerprints weren't, which makes absolutely no sense to me, especially when you're dealing with a homicide case. And unfortunately, the vault had leaked, and coffee kind of filled up with water. So some of the boys' remains were extremely damaged. They had to remove the hands and put them in formaldehyde to try to get the fingerprints off the fingers. You got to remember the boys were buried with their hands held together.
Yeah.
So they were able to get some of the prints. They weren't able to get all of them because some of the damage was too severe, but they were able to get some of them. And those fingerprints did not match. And I repeat, did not match J85 when the initial investigators of the case tried saying that that fingerprint came from a small child.
Right.
You got to remember that fingerprint was in blunt. So whoever left that fingerprint was present at the time of the murders, plain and simple. That's very, very important to point out.
Also, Rich, we don't have any photographs. We have no photography. We've got no documentation apart from the lifts that they actually did on the fingerprint. We have no photographs of this print.
Right.
I think it was Hamilton testified that he tried to take pictures of it but couldn't. It was just so convenient, the things that they couldn't take pictures of, or the flash went out on certain things, like they didn't want to really show Dali's maroon pillow in any actual light, even though we've caught it in one of the photos. You can see where the flash is used, you can see that there's blood on that pillow, and also obviously the DNA proved that Dali's blood was on one side of that pillow at least, and Damon's could have got on it as it was moved onto the floor. On the other side of the pillow, we still don't know the internal pillow, if that was ever tested, with the pooling in the center of it, but we don't know if that was ever tested. We don't have any DNA evidence for that, but yeah, it was just convenient how they didn't manage to take a photograph of, such a important piece of evidence. If you was at a crime scene, any detective, if they were at a crime scene and found a bloody fingerprint, it would be probably one of the most important pieces of evidence of that whole crime scene. But these guys didn't think that, getting another camera, a better camera or something, finding a way of documenting that print besides the lift.
Same with the blood in the garage. That was just completely overlooked.
Right.
Well, I think it was
blood on the door. The blood in the utility room, on the utility room door as well. There's fingerprints on that door. There's absolutely no pictures of the back side of that door, and we can see from the front side that the fingerprint almost goes around, like a hand has gone around. And I think it was Jantz, or off the top of my head, it was one of the later people. I think there was one from ABC. They checked some of those prints as well, and I believe they excluded Darlie and Darren from both those prints. The only time that anyone has ever mentioned that maybe possibly could be Darlie's left ring finger was the state's witness when it came to Darlie's appeals. Now,
Yes.
obviously, they're going to try and stop her appeals. They're going to try and do anything to stop her getting those appeals, because that's what they do. She appeals, they fight back. That is how the system works. So to me, it's just very crazy that one person out of all these people that have ever looked at it said maybe possibly it could be Darlie's left ring finger.
I want to
But
say
he
something
couldn't
on that too.
confirm.
Yeah, during the trial, since we're talking about the finger really fast here, since we're discussing it, during the trial, the sentiment, the thought was that it was the boy's fingerprint. And if you think about that, they had Darlie's fingerprints during the trial. If it would have been Darlie's fingerprint, they would have 100% been able to say this is Darlie's fingerprint. That would have been detrimental to her case. They did not.
Exactly.
They basically just said, well, we don't know whose it is, so it has to be Devin's. I believe that
Right.
that is what James Cron leaned towards the most, was implying that it was Devin's fingerprint.
Right.
Simply
He didn't
because
compare
there was
it.
no, he didn't have
Yeah,
any
he didn't.
fingerprints to compare it to.
Yeah.
But they did not say that it was Darlie's during the trial, and they did have Darlie's fingerprints during the trial.
Exactly.
And that,
100%.
to me, helps to rule out the fact that it was not Darlie's. I mean, we knew it was not Darlie's for a very long time, but they had to have known that during the trial, or they would have simply said, it's Darlie's print, point proven, problem solved. We don't have to ever discuss it again. But they didn't. So
Well,
I'll just
there's
leave
a
that
real
right there.
there's a real problem with the Devons, that being Devin or Damon's fingerprints, because how did they get from one side of that table to back over to where they were injured if
If there's not a
I
bloody
mean,
trail.
right, there's none of their blood anywhere around it. It's on completely on the interior of those couch areas, and that table is on the outside.
Rich, can you pull up a table of the map? Do you have one loaded in here so we can look
Oh
at it?
yeah, Well, you want the blood map?
Yeah, let's do that. And while you're
Yeah,
doing
well,
that, I wanted to answer
because-
kind of. Yeah, go ahead, Tar or Mystery.
Sorry, I'm just
No.
saying, because many people mistake this mistake, because on a lot of the documentaries they always show picture of the blood on the coffee table, and the coffee table is not where the bloody fingerprint was.
Right.
The bloody fingerprint is behind the north couch, which is this couch. I don't know if you can use a pointer, Rich.
I can. Let me
So
get it up.
Yeah.
All right, now what were you saying?
the north
Where
The north
85J was
couch.
located.
the
Well,
north
this
couch
here
is-
was
no,
yeah.
the north couch is the couch that Darlie wasn't lying on. The other
Okay, you're-
couch.
You're talking
Right,
about this guy
85
here?
Yes, this couch here, the north couch. 85J was found behind this couch on this glass table that you see, behind this
Yeah.
sofa here. And
Yes.
it was much taller than the glass coffee table that's
Credenza.
in the center. It's like it's as high up as the back of the sofa.
No, it's like a sofa table, so it
Yes.
Right.
goes right.
So it always almost meets the top of the sofa.
Yes.
So why Damon would put his hand up there, and obviously and he didn't go that way because
Right.
Darlie said that they walked in front of the north sofa.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they walked
But-
between the other
Then-
glass
Steve-O says, I believe it was the route of the killer past that print and squeezed between the glass table and the end of the north sofa as there is a blood smear. That's not where Darlie says she's seen him.
Table in that.
Right,
But-
and then Damon ends up by the wall. So how he would get his fingerprint all the way over on the other side of the glass table behind the north sofa is not consistent with the evidence.
Well, and not just that, let me point something out. If you look at my pointer, this is where Devin was found.
Now, Tracy's asked, was it Judge Francis who said in a writ that the fingerprint allow would have been exonerate Darlie? You mean the judge that had Alzheimer's? That's the one you keep saying had Alzheimer's, right? So it doesn't matter what he says, right? Right, Tracy?
Out. When the first responders got there, then he was already deceased. This is where Damon was found, in this area here, and he was still alive, but just barely. And my assumption would be shortly after the first responders got there, from excessive bleeding, suffered a cardiac arrest as a result of severe blood loss.
You don't like to speculate, but you do it all the time.
So how did that fingerprint get up here? And it being one of the boys.
Well, it couldn't be an intruder either.
We got a ton of questions here.
Here, I want to jump in really fast and answer a couple that might span a few of these questions while we've got this map up. First of all, they say we tested, 100 samples and they've all come back to either Darlie, Devin, or Damon or whatever. But if you look at this blood map, every single one of those X's is where the blood was not tested. And I think it was Bathsheba saying that it's when typically to find the intruder's DNA, especially in a case where sharp force weapons like knives were used, a lot of times it gets slippery and the intruder can cut themselves. But that could be a fraction of a piece of DNA. It's like finding a needle in a haystack sometimes. So I wanted to address that. And then going off of some of what WD-40 and Bathsheba are saying, there's a lot of cases where we know that the entire family inside was murdered and they can't find, like we were just talking about BTK, they can't find any DNA that links it back. These people are good, and taking the murder weapon from inside the house and leaving it inside the house was a huge plus for the intruder. And people say, how is there evidence of an intruder in this house? Well, not only are we talking about 85J here, but we've got at least a dozen other fingerprints that never came back to match people. Some of them are on the sliding glass door. Some of them are on the window. Like Mystery Maverick said, some of them are on that utility room door. Then in 1997, before Darlie even goes to trial, the day of trial, the original DNA report comes back and there was a pubic hair and a facial hair that did not match anybody. Unfortunately, the defense didn't have time to call in a DNA forensic expert back in 1997, but that pubic hair and facial hair the allele patterns do not match anybody. And on top of that, they were on the crime scene, on top of the crime scene. It's not like they were found upstairs in the bathroom or somewhere like that. They were found kind of where the couch that Darlie was laying on, right in that area where Damon was originally laying. So there is evidence of an intruder in this home.
And also, when you look at this map and you see all those X's, you assume, when you look at that, the legend is not real clear, because I studied this map for an hour trying to figure it out. And it dawned on me that there.
Well, Jonna says 85J came up with no male DNA, though. I want to see how they handle that.
Red X's. And I think
that weren't tested.
I think that was a tricky maneuver on the part of the prosecution, because it makes you believe that it's Damon's blood. I mean, it's red.
Darlie's.
There you go.
Or yeah. I agree with both of those statements.
Yeah.
This here's actually the DNA map. So these were all the spots that were tested. And then if back it up, you can see all the spots that were not tested.
Right.
So I want to
And like
point that one out.
every single one of those X's, it's like finding a needle in a haystack to actually find the DNA of the intruder. And back in
Also,
1996, yeah, DNA was.
Also, can I say it's just pot luck. That's the
Yeah.
truth of the matter. It's just pot luck if you
Yeah.
find DNA, if you find fingerprints. I mean,
Yes.
I've seen brutal cases where they've got one partial pink fingerprint and that's it. And 3 people have been brutally attacked, you know? And
Right.
so to me, it's like people seem to.
The truth says the hoopla made about the kitchen sink was baloney. Darlie admitted to being at the sink to wet towels only after she saw that they took the sink. Both of their first initial statements did not mention anything about getting wet towels. None of the towels were wet, and there was no diluted blood.
Think like DNA and things like that are like breadcrumbs, and people just drop them, and then the investigators miraculously find them all laid out neatly for them. It doesn't work like that. It all depends on what's collected. We've seen in this that a lot of it was biased, what was collected, because a lot of the samples were taken around the kitchen sink.
Down on the bottom, Rich is making it clear that you can't insult the family members, but they still have yet to boot Jan Nissen, who straight blamed it on Darren. He is a family member.
Which was not like part of the crime scene. So we see that a lot of the samples taken, and these are the
Because
only
there's no water on
samples
the
that
floor.
we've got to go on, is what the state decided to test, what the police decided to collect.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it is a one-sided thing, and whether or not you find DNA is basically just pot luck.
Yeah.
That you look in the right place, do you see what I mean? Look at all we've just said about all the X's not being tested. We
Yeah.
don't know if in one of those samples could have been
Right.
the perpetrator's blood. We don't know if the perpetrator, maybe they did cut themselves. Maybe the blood on the other side of the island is the perpetrator's.
That right there.
I mean, they
That's
wouldn't
what I
be,
wanna know.
even if they cut themselves, they wouldn't be bleeding profusely
It's
from
just a slip,
a
like a
flip of
paper
the
cut
knife.
sometimes.
You might have
Yeah, like what Darlie had on her
you
finger.
might have a small gash,
Yeah.
Well, and if that X out the back door is not Darlie's blood, or is unknown blood, like Danelle says,
Mosquito.
whose is it?
Exactly, and we don't know, and that is the thing about crime scenes. Obviously, you can't collect every single piece of evidence at a crime scene. That's insane. And that just doesn't happen. It would be ideal because it would. Do you see what I mean? It would give a more definitive, thing to see. But it's not realistic that you're going to collect everything. So you do need to focus on certain things. But you see that they focused on the wrong things.
Well, and as the
They
comments are saying over
focused
here,
on the completely wrong things.
right?
Like
They focused on the sink because they knew Darlie was standing at that sink, so they knew anything that they tested around the sink area was going to come back to Darlie because she was the
And
only
remember, Darlie did not mention the
leader
sink in her
that
first
was, walking
statement, and neither
around.
did Darren.
And so
She told them she was going. She told them she was going back and forth and wetting towels.
She didn't
So
cut her feet
yeah,
either.
you're right. They know her blood's going to be there, and
right,
they did luminol testing around the sink.
Right.
Well,
so all it does is prove Darlie what Darlie said. All of this blood evidence, even though they've gone to the trouble of trying to show that Darlie's blood was here, and here, and whatever, it still shows that what she said actually happened.
But she didn't say it until she saw the sink.
Can you show the laser which side Darlie went down to follow the intruder, and then we know the intruder took the outside of the island.
It would have been in this general direction here.
And then she walked
Or it
behind
could have
that.
been, yeah, it was
Right
in this
to the
general
left.
direction on the.
Could have
Okay,
been.
so
Could have been.
this is the Roman room. Okay, by the time this guy got down to the end of the couch was when Darley started coming too. Okay, she comes around, goes through here. Okay, now we're getting in the kitchen area.
Where the glass
This
is.
is the island. This is the sink. Would have come through here. This here's the utility room, and then out into the garage, and then out through the window here. Now, another thing I wanted to state, and we're talking about blood evidence. In 1996, they did take over 100 samples from the house for testing. However, this house was a bloodbath. You know, people didn't have paper cuts. I mean, there was blood everywhere.
Yeah, you don't.
And you have a double homicide with an attempted homicide on top of it. I don't care if you did 50 tests or 600 tests. You need to test the areas of question.
Well, how do you explain these
So,
three?
and I know Tara's touched on this.
We don't know what way she went.
I touched on it. Why would you not do more testing in the utility room? Especially if you know that the intruder went in and out of that area. Even if you didn't think that, why not test it anyway to exclude it? This wasn't done. I'm not saying they didn't do any testing in the utility room. They did. But as you can see, it's extremely minute. Okay, and they did no
And how about
testing
the
in the garage.
garage?
That's what I just said. They did no testing in the garage when there was clear evidence of blood being in there. Okay, this is
They
not
collected
an
it.
thorough investigation.
Rich,
There was also materials that looked like clothing that had come from the wash basket that was like next to the washer and dryer. I
I
mean,
think I
that
have
could
that
have soaked
picture
up.
if you want to bear with me.
Yeah,
Well, it's like,
that
why
could
did
have
they not
soaked
do
up
more
blood.
DNA testing around where the murder weapon was found and where we believe the intruder exited the house? Like, they're cherry picking. You can tell by the X's, they're cherry picking what pieces of evidence they want to collect.
Very much so. Kathy, were you going to say something?
yes. I wanted to address a question that was posted in the chat that is erroneous. They said that no Y chromosome, there was no male DNA in the fingerprint. They couldn't detect, it's called YSTR, I believe.
Right.
And it's like a tandem repeat test, and they withdraw the STR, and the Y chromosome is carried on the STR. But they couldn't even detect STR. They couldn't get a standard tandem repeat on even Darley because the print was too deteriorated. And that means that no, right, they couldn't detect any of the STR in Darley's blood, let alone in an intruder's blood. They should have been able to detect it on Darley's. And while the X chromosome may not be there, the Y chromosome will be absent.
Yeah.
So they didn't get STR results.
Chromosome. So a YSTR strain can only come from a male because only men carry the Y chromosome.
I want to mention that too. I think that was perfect, Kathy. I'm glad you said that. That is just the trace DNA on the fingerprint itself. It is not eliminating the fingerprint from being contributed by a male. It just means they weren't able to pick up any trace DNA, as in the oils on your fingers. But you're also talking about a fingerprint that was lifted from a bloody fingerprint that was preserved from cardstock and tape. It's not preserved well at all because back then we didn't really know enough about DNA to know trace DNA would ever even be a thing. It does not eliminate that fingerprint from being contributed by a male. It does not at all. It is still possible that fingerprint was left there by a male, even though we weren't able to pick up trace DNA on it.
Well, and we didn't even know YSTR existed in 1996.
for Trace,
Well,
right? That wasn't an option.
Not for
Yeah.
Trace. I mean, we even studied like
That's
the
a good question.
YSTR strands when we did the Austin yogurt shop murders, and that's when we educated ourselves about how YSTR works, Joni.
Right, right.
So moving on, somebody asked a question maybe to you about the writ from the, let me go back.
Well, I think you're going a little
Judge
bit too far ahead.
Francis. Yeah,
You-
said in the
you-
writ that the fingerprints would allow the exoneration of Darley. So I think we kind of answered that question for you, WD-40. And then I think people want to know, and I think this should be a great question for Janelle and Annie Oakley, is tell us about Baja and Helena.
Oh,
and
God, here we go.
their testimony against, we've got Rich, any update on location of Baja Jovel? In my opinion, she was jealous, judgmental of Darley. Robbery gone wrong. Kids weren't supposed to be down there. And so we've got, another one from Bohana is, Ellie. The way the housekeeper babysitter talked about how Darley treated the baby was very damaging in court. Can you and Annie Oakley?
That wasn't damaging in court about how she smothered Drake because the jury didn't get to hear it. The judge left her out. He felt like it didn't have anything to do with the case.
And Danelle, could you guys kind of speak on that, or Rich? You guys all know that
Well,
best.
First of all, that's again, WD-40, that's kind of getting in a touchy area. So I don't want to go into huge detail.
You can't.
Again, I mean, the Innocent Projects, they're aware of these people, and they're going to investigate it accordingly. As far as Basha Jabel, yeah, I do think that she was very jealous of Darley in many ways.
Well, explain why Darley left Baja $10,000 in her will.
Again, I don't know that I want to go into big detail with it at this time, but I have had lengthy conversations with Darley Lynn about Basha, and I've heard Basha on a couple of different interviews done by a non-supporter. It's actually a really good interview. One of them was for a couple hours with her, and then one of them was much shorter. Basha Javel changes what she says in it. And one of the interviews, she said, "Oh no, it was Darley. Darley did it." And then in the next interview, she said, "Oh no, Darren had the whole thing set up."
No, that's not what happened. She kept saying that she knew Darley did it. She knew something was going to happen in that house. That's not what happened. And then Baja went into the stealing of the white Jaguar that Darley was in on it. The white Jaguar, the first Jaguar that they did an insurance job. Nope, you're wrong, Rich.
And executed. I mean, it's quite a difference of opinion just in two separate interviews. But which one was it?
Yeah.
Cross-examination, Baja was diagnosed with a mental disorder.
Yes.
So was Darley Key was in. That doesn't mean you can't testify. A mental disorder won't keep you from being convicted of a crime. Yeah, Darley Key was in counseling for quite a long time, as we all know. You don't go into counseling unless you have some kind of mental disorder. You can diagnose anybody with anything.
I believe bipolar with a major depressive disorder. So how does that affect her testimony?
It doesn't. Just like if Darley was to say, I don't know if I killed these kids because I have bipolar or blah, 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 it doesn't save you.
Because I will say
and severe drug addiction.
And a severe drug addiction.
What are you talking about, a severe drug addiction? Have you ever seen her do any drugs? She said that she did drugs with Darley and Darren. There was white residue found upstairs. There was weed found upstairs.
And all of that combined, I don't know what her headspace was at that time. And I truly believe that Baja loved those boys.
I do too.
And she had to make it fit in her head. She had to put blame somewhere, in my opinion. Do you have
You're speculating, and that's where you're putting blame on this stuff.
anything to say about that, Annie Oakley?
Basically, Helena was very superstitious, old country Poland. Basha was not. There was a history of mental illness, I believe, in the family.
Oh, I believe. How do you know? You've never even spoke to either one of these people. Is this what Darlie hires? There's mental illness in every family. Robbie Key, the one that she married, was convicted of grand theft.
Which is not, they shouldn't be condemned or anything for that. If it's
But then stop condemning them.
in your genes. They didn't have the bipolar medicines back then that they have now. And so she could.
Then why did Darlie leave them 10 grand?
Yeah, Barbara could be very unpredictable in behavior as well.
How would you know? You've never met her.
Well as she couldn't tell the same story twice anyway. As far as that goes, I mean, everybody I'm sure that is involved, there was a neighbor or anyone who's being re-questioned, and like Britt said, we are letting the Innocence Project investigate it. We're not doing any of the investigative legwork at this point. We're letting them get the job done. But there was plenty of, if you want to dispute what she said about the baby, there's some testimony. I believe it came from the babysitter who talked about Drake always wanting to pull a blanket over his head, especially when he was taking a bottle. And that nobody was smothering him. That was his habit. But Helena didn't spend enough time around him to know that, or
the jury
spend
didn't hear that
time
anyway,
with the
so it
baby.
doesn't matter.
So, or she didn't like it. Maybe it was superstitious. You weren't supposed to let the baby do that. So, I think that's where a lot of that came from. But there's read the transcript. There's testimony about the blanket from, I believe, is it the woman, and they laughed at Helena when it happened. So I'm sure that hurt her feelings. So that might be what colored her testimony.
Yeah, and there's people saying that Baja sounded very out of it on the interview that she did do, and she testified Darlie was upset about some.
Baja did not sound very out of it. She cried over Devin and Damon. Plus, she was old. She didn't sound out of it. Bathsheba.
Something the day before the murders, I believe. This is all hearsay, though. We weren't in that house. We don't know.
Well, look, I can tell you, I can fill in some of those blanks. What I know that I was told that I could share. If you look at Basha's testimony, she kind of makes Darlie Lynn look psychotic because she's saying that Darlie's pacing around room to room carrying something, but she didn't know what it was, and talking to herself and muttering under her breath. So
Baja told me during that interview, which they're talking about, there was my 2 interviews. Baja told me that Damon was outside playing. She went outside because Darren and Darlie were in the kitchen and they were having a huge fight. She told me during that interview that Damon was kind of looking down playing with the stick, and he said, "Can I go spend the night with you tonight, Baja?" And she was trying to explain to him, "Well, no, I have to work tomorrow," and blah, blah, blah. "Why would you want to spend the night with me?" She told me that Damon said, "Because Mommy's being mean to me." That was for everybody to hear.
I had asked Darlie about that. I said, "Is that true?" I said, "Did you do that?" And she said, shortly before, they came to the house after work. She said that she had gotten a call from where Darren's Jaguar was because it was broke down in the parking lot. And the guy wanted that car out of the parking lot. And so she said that guy called her up and was screaming obscenities to her, which she told me what he said, but I'm not going to say it on a live session. But it was bad though. It was really bad, yelling, swearing, screaming at her as if it was her fault. And lo and behold, once she gets off the phone with this guy, they come into the house. And yeah, Darlie said she was pissed because this guy had just insulted the hell out of her on the phone. She didn't even hardly know anything about the situation. And she was really mad about it that Darren didn't take care of business with his vehicle. So,
and Darren
you know,
was at work while this phone call came in. So Darlie
Yeah.
kind of had to take the brunt of that.
she had to take it all.
Yeah. And people are asking, you know, Darlie wanted to let Helena go. I'm sure she was upset. That's true. And then Steve said, I thought she hated the job and was reluctant even to go in the second day on June 5th. She didn't really want to go back over to the Routier household to help. And speaking about Darlie's behavior, they had been doing laundry. And, you know, me and Joan speculate, was Darlie running around the house, putting towels up in the bathroom, putting laundry up in the kids' room? I mean, you know, when you've got a big household and you're done a full laundry day, like she was probably walking around putting things away.
Helena was actually on June 5th. Helena was there that day, and you know, Basha came there a little bit later, but Helena was actually doing laundry that day.
Right.
Yeah. So, but if you read Basha's testimony, I mean, it sounds odd.
Well, and Basha and Helena saw on June 5th, when she picked her mother up that day, they saw somebody looking in the garage, a black car back there, which she testified to. So
because the garage was open and the person backed in and out just like I did. How come Dana was never asked to be on the stand? She was there. How come she wasn't? And Rich, I'll let you know this, a little secret about Rich. He's told me that Dana doesn't even go to see Darlie.
Literally see somebody looking into the garage and make comments about it. And then she goes on to say that, you know, Darlie did this, yet how coincidental that somebody was stalking, looking in their garage that day, the same day.
And
when a lot of people, even when I was there, even when I was down there, a lot of people will use that alley because they'll go by and they'll look at the fountain that they got outside. And a lot of people will use that alley, you know, to back out and go out because there's only Linda Vista to get out of that Platte. If you go on back down, you were in Darlock Heights, you're way stuck back in the Platte.
And again,
12 hours before the crime.
That was never properly investigated as well. Something else I want to point out.
How can they properly investigate that? She just said she saw a car. Okay, what are they going to do? Stop everybody
out there? So next question is from the great Tracy. And let me tell you, folks, the truth. She knows this case inside and out.
She does not.
I would love to have her on my panel.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad we're on the same side because I wouldn't want to be on the opposite side of the truth because she don't play. She takes this very seriously and rightly so. Anyway, the truth says, was it Judge Francis who said in a writ that the fingerprint would exonerate Darlie? That's why this case has been such an uphill climb, because the king of ruling. Okay, I didn't lose everybody, did I? I don't know what's going on here.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
I wish you'd say that again.
Yeah.
Yeah. The truth, she said she mistyped it a little bit. Basically, what she's saying, was it Judge Francis who said in a writ that the fingerprint alone would not allow to exonerate Darlie? I tried to correct some of the grammar there.
Correct. I read that as well.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough there. It's going to have to be DNA.
Wow, we got iHeart 1990 in here. I haven't seen iHeart in a long, long time.
That's Bohana. She follows me on TikTok. So hello, thank you for coming in.
Yeah, no, she's always frequenting my podcast. I'm
And
really
she
glad she's here.
looks
Oh
at
yeah,
both sides in a very, I think, well thought out way. She does look at both sides.
yeah, she does, and you need to, you have to. So this is iHeart's.
Well, why don't you tell them where to look? Why don't you tell them where to look, Rich? You don't show. You tell your people where to look.
Question. It's a touchy area. This probably would be a good question for Danelle. She said, "What's happening with the new testing, and what are they planning to do after?" That's really difficult to answer because we're really not allowed to answer questions like that. Believe me, I wish we could. Let me just say this: Vanessa Potkin from the Innocence Project takes this case extremely serious.
Yeah, because they get money.
I think Vanessa's doing an incredible job. I've always said if anybody's going to solve this horrible thing, it's going to be Vanessa. But anyway, Danelle, iHeart's asking what's happening with the new testing and what are they planning on doing after?
And Dad, onto that, some people have asked, does new testing include the sock, any of the towels, anything like that? So there you go, Danelle.
I think that it is public record that they have submitted for the fingerprints to be processed. That had to change locations, but it's all been approved, and it's actually an improvement from our original plan of action. Those are in progress right now with the expert through the Innocence Project. They have retained an outside expert that's going to work those.
The junk science expert?
They are testing material on the sock. That had to go through kind of a lengthy process, and my understanding is that there is a multi-step process involved there. And material will be sent to a new location for the next leg of testing. That is all very fluid. It's all, kind of adjusting and moving around as it is needed. I don't have a lot of information on that because I shouldn't have it. They're keeping it very sealed.
Yeah, because you talk too much. Right?
Workers have reflected on being sealed as long as they keep it sealed for the integrity of the case. They are working. I mean, it's just like any other ongoing investigation. The police are not going to have every single thing they teams and then per case to whatever person they need to present it to get a conviction. So they are working on it. It's in progress. Things are moving. Finally, there was a little bit of a holdup, but I do believe that's all been addressed and it's all where it needs to be. The sock testing is progressing perfectly. That's exactly what we want. It's in the next leg, and then the fingerprints, those are progressing exactly like we want, and those should start being processed rather quickly. They did have to, again, rule out the boys, Darlie, Darren, and anybody else that was in the house at the time of the crime, which has all been done. So yet again, we have proven that those fingerprints were not Darlie's. The CIU agrees, and that is why those fingerprints are being tested.
Let's get it.
So anybody that wants to argue that, argue with the district attorney's office, because they're the ones that have initially ordered all of this to be done. So take that as you will.
And I think that some of the lengthy process in this, just from other cases that we've done and bringing DNA into, this level going into 2025, how much DNA has differed from 1995, 96, 97. Sometimes they have to replicate now that DNA, and that can take some time to replicate DNA so they have enough to test, and they're not going to run out of samples. Like we saw this in the Golden State Killer case. They wanted to replicate it several times, so they didn't use up the only possible DNA that, you know, they could take to court. And kind of going off that, somebody in the comments, Danelle asked, is there going to be a new medical expert that's going to review all of this after it's been done and tested?
Sorry, I've got a driver in front of me that's trying to get me to pass it, and I have no desire to pass it. No, you're good. I can't speak on any DNA topics. I don't have the information on DNA, and I cannot speak on anything regarding Darlie's DNA. I know that what you're saying is absolutely true. They do have the process of taking, you know, a very small amount of DNA and replicating it just like our human body does naturally.
Right.
And so that is part of a process that they do, but I can't speak to anything about that in regards to Darlie's case.
Did you hear me ask, will a new medical expert be introduced to review the findings of any said testing?
I think we lost her momentarily. Hold your question, Anna, because that somebody did ask that question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It is a good question. Now, iHeart says the Truth non-supporters don't believe she wet towels. I've shown them pictures of the towels, and they still deny she wets towels. Well,
Right. Another thing, Rich, is people say that Darren and Darlie made up the story about the towels after the crime. So how did the towels get on the crime scene then before they made this story up?
This is a wet towel, folks, with blood on it. She didn't wet towels? Now wait, hold on a second.
Black and white.
I'll tell you how.
Towel.
How would the towels get there? No, they made up the story about her going to the sink after they saw the sink was gone. How did the towels get there? That's a good question. But the story was made up. Look at the first initial written statements. They didn't mention anything about Darlie going back and forth to wet towels. She had to explain why she was at the sink.
From the blood.
Oh, check it out. We got some more towels here. Now, we can't exactly prove whether or not, I mean, this one here is still folded.
You can't tell if they're wet by the picture.
This one is not. So now, is this towel wet? Can't really tell too well in this picture.
Can't tell at all.
You got to remember, instead of using the best picture technology available at the time, they chose to use a disposable camera at a double homicide crime scene.
Picture of a fully wet towel.
So who really knows why that transpired, but it did.
Well, and I don't think that by the time they even got the photographer in there to take pictures, some of those towels had probably dried. But
But all right, now look at this for a second. Okay, now a very good friend of mine gave me this picture a long time ago to compare. Now the one on the right here, this is actual part of a crime scene photo. This one here on the left is just some random photo of a dry, bloody towel. Take a look at the difference here. This is a wet one. This is a dry one. Look at the difference. So when anybody says, like when Darlie said, she was going back and forth from the sink to the boys, wetting towels. Well, what's this? It looks like a bloody towel to me.
That's the towel she had on her neck. That's the one.
All right, so Alina Gomez says, are they retesting anything related to the screen and or the fibers? I know the answer to that, but I don't know that I want to answer it at this time.
Can I answer?
Miss Marie has a very good understanding of how the fiber got on that night. So I think this would be a good question for Miss Marie Maverick.
Go ahead, Daryl.
I believe the same as Bart Epstein and Terry Labors.
Junk science.
Their analysis. I believe that fiber was transferred. When they were dusting for prints, the first place they dusted was round the screen.
The fingerprint brush and the fiber, the fingerprint brush was actually thicker. They proved that.
Another thing that makes me believe that is that only one of these microscopic fibers was found on this bread knife. Just 1 micron. And every time that Charles Lynch did his...
It was stuck in the tip of it. It was stuck in one of the grooves on the serrate. What she's got to say.
Testing, even though he never fully cut the screen in the T-shape, he just did a few slashes. But even with that 1 slash he did, and he said he did a longer one as well, there was hundreds of those fibers that came off the screen, not visible to the eye. So
that's right. I agree.
How did 1 fiber manage to get on the knife
because it was stuck in the groove, just like he testified to. 1 was stuck in it. It could have been more on the knife, but as it went back from the screen to the knife block, a lot of them could have fallen off. Speculation.
Knife was used to cut the screen, surely there would be more than 1 micron of fiber.
Again, it was stuck. It was trapped in a groove.
Secondly, this feeds into Bathsheba's question, can the fiber on the bread knife be further tested? The answer is no, because there is no more fiber. There wasn't even enough for Charles Lynch to initially do the secondary testing to prove.
You're not mentioning the plastic seal, the rubber plastic that was found in that knife block either. They're not mentioning that so far. From the window, the rubber seal.
That it was actually from the screen.
Let me make a comment about that, Tara. There was a memo found from Charlie Lynch a few years after Darley's case. He was trying to build up his desire to get this microscopic fiber analysis where they determine the exact chemical composition of fibers to truly identify them. So he sent an email, a memo, interoffice memo to his boss.
Where's this at?
That he had actually suggested that.
Where is this memo? Why don't you post it? You said you've seen it, right? Why don't you post it? And quit saying he actually. You guys give yourself away with the word actually.
Testing to the district attorney's office.
He stated clearly in his own statement that more testing should be done to clearly identify this. He stuck up for the case.
For this particular fiber. And the district attorney's office said, no, it was not necessary. But
okay, where are these emails? Where are they? Put them on your TikTok. I bet you can't. It's hearsay.
He did present it to them and ask them if they wanted to do that.
How do you know? You're saying this.
That, and I assume he was going to outsource it.
You assume.
Or use it as an opportunity to get that technology in Swift's office themselves. But it was not done because the district attorney chose not to have that testing done.
That's what you say. That's what you say, but you have no proof of that. Show us these documents. It should be FOIA. Show us the documents of the emails. Show us their denial. You won't be able to do it.
So after that, which was in Darley's appeals process, that's when he writes an affidavit saying that there's not enough of the there's not enough of the fiber found on the knife.
That's right.
To even run that testing.
Right.
It's called consumptive testing. So that means if they test it, they will never have that piece of evidence again. And I do have a theory about the knife. And one of my theories has always been, obviously, we know the intruder took a knife out of the knife block in the kitchen.
Obviously, we know that the intruder. Wrong.
As soon as you walk through,
I cannot hear Anna.
Can you guys hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, let me start over. So I believe, going off of the knife fiber as well, when the intruder came through the back laundry room door, that knife block would have been directly to his right. And what if he picked up the bread knife, serrated knife, because it does have a long handle and typically sits next to the biggest knife?
What if?
I have a very similar knife block, and I constantly pull out the serrated knife, and I'm like, oh, that's not my butcher knife. And so maybe he pulled the serrated knife and said, this is not the weapon I want, split it back down, a fiber got onto it. And then if that's not the case, we've got such bad contamination as Mystery Maverick was just stating. So, like the
Right.
truth said,
It's more
if
like
you can put a
it's more
hole
likely
in that
it's
fiber,
secondary
it really,
transfer.
yeah, from
It's
transfer.
from some kind of secondary transfer. There's no way that there wouldn't be more fibers found than that.
And if you can rule out the fiber and explain it away, then like the truth said, this case just really falls apart, doesn't it? Because
Doesn't
the
fall
blonde
apart.
hair that Cron originally found on that back screen ended up coming back to a police officer.
Yeah, and it was the prosecution that had it tested, and it was the prosecution that came out and said, no, it was Sarah Jones's hair. The prosecution did that.
So Cron made assumptions early on before getting any testing back, before talking to Darlie, before talking to Darren. Darlie was in
You still have no evidence of an intruder to this day, and that's what Cron said 30 minutes in.
surgery when Cron got on the scene. So he didn't even have a witness statement before he goes in and starts assuming a lot of, in my opinion, very subjective.
This is a guy that had 4,000 scenes, murders that he had been on.
Conclusions and assumptions that he at the time did not
Well, look at you. You guys keep saying, you guys keep making conclusions and assumptions on the stand right here on your panel.
have enough information to make. So,
Okay, so we got it. We're actually going over on time a little bit, but this is going very well, and I think we're getting a lot of very good questions asked. Really, and I wanted to thank the audience for being respectful to us, and as you can see, we're clearly being respectful to you, and that's wonderful. It's always good to see that. Ellie's asking a question that is asked a lot, and I know we can answer it here. Ellie asked, was a rape kit ever done on Darlie? There's quite a story behind this.
No, ain't no story behind it. And here we go with this bullshit.
Many people say, oh, yeah, she had a rape kit done. She had a rape kit done. Actually, she did not. Let me tell you what did happen.
She had a testing for sexual assault that was done at Baylor, and if they saw any evidence of it, then they would have passed it on to Parkland to have more thorough testing done. They didn't see any evidence of a rape from an exam by the nurses.
When Darlie was at Baylor University Hospital, and first of all, in 1996, Baylor University Hospital did not do rape kits. If they had ordered a rape kit, she would have had to have had it done at Parkland. Parkland did do rape kit.
Parkland would have done a full rape assessment if they saw any, DNA or anything that looked like she had been raped on the sexual assault exam that she was given. But no, she wasn't given a rape test at Baylor. He's correct there. But the people at Baylor didn't see any evidence to show that Parkland needed to do an extended version of a rape test on it.
At that time. However, what they did do to Darlie is they just gave her a standard, because she was asked if she felt as though maybe she had been sexually assaulted or whatnot.
And she said she felt some pressure down there, right? She's been stabbed, beat, slit up. I mean, just her arms beaten up, raped. And she wakes up when Damon taps her on her shoulder. Mommy, mommy. Yeah.
She said that she felt some pressure down there, and that's pretty much all she said about it. So they did do a vaginal examination. They also did, standard swab tests for STDs and whatnot. All the STDs come back negative, and they couldn't find any evidence of Darlie being raped. However, if they really wanted to do that rape kit, which I really wish they would have,
if they just found evidence from the standard test, like you said, they would have sent it over to Parkland for a further rape test. They didn't see anything, so they didn't.
She would have had that done at Parkland, because again, at that time, Baylor University in Dallas Hospital did not do rape kits. So the answer to the question is, she did have a vaginal exam. The area was checked out. She did have a swab examination, swab testing done, which was negative across the board. Also, while we're on tests, Darlie also had a drug panel done, just a basic drug panel done, which was negative across the board. I want to make that clear. So the answer would be no. She did not have a thorough rape kit done. However, the area in question was examined, but it was found that chances are there was no assault.
That's right.
Right. And
Rick.
I
I have a question to ask.
Go ahead, Annie.
Okay, they said they did testing. Well, in a rape kit, they test for STDs, for bacterial stuff. Did they ever?
That's what they do with the vaginal swab. They look for STDs, other DNA. That's what they look for with the vaginal swab, which they did perform that at Baylor.
Test for, while they may have tested for semen, did they ever test for foreign DNA?
I can answer that.
Okay, go ahead, Danelle.
So Darlie did not have a rape kit done. She did have a swab. The swab did check for those common STDs.
Yep.
And that was basically it. I do not know that it was truly checked for semen. The sequel or the swabs were
Hi, James Wood.
destroyed and were not kept for. But again, there was not a rape kit done. It was only a sterile speculum exam with swabs to check for STDs and a visual examination to make sure there was no obvious signs or symptoms of a rape. But let's be real, she's had 3 kids, so
she had a very loose vagina, you said.
So.
Well, and I think it was the resident that did the vaginal exam, and he was looking for things like forced tearing, maybe
vaginal trauma.
Why would somebody look? He had to hold her mouth down with a sock, beat her arm, slice her throat, and calmly have sex with her. Yeah, they're looking for force stuff. They didn't see any sign of it.
Right, vaginal trauma, that kind of thing. And he reports, when you read his notes, he says it's negative. You know, he didn't find anything that led him to be suspicious or anything else.
Yep.
Well,
A lot of rape cases, though, don't necessarily include penetration. I mean, there's a lot that are attempted rapes with no penetration at all. It's not really about the penetration for most criminals.
It's about control.
The year's 1996, and the parameters for what constituted rape have changed over the years. And so what was rape in 1996 is not the same as a woman would say was rape today. So there's that whole, we're back to that gray area, you know?
Well, and talking about these testing, and especially with Joni and Danelle, they're both registered nurses and a nurse practitioner. And Joni worked at Children's in Dallas kind of during this time. Other things that weren't tested was Danelle, I believe they took scrapings from under Darlie's nails, and those have never been tested.
Yep.
Or they took
nobody even knows we were attacked.
Yeah, they took a rag and cleaned her nail. Yeah.
let me discuss that real fast. Jimmy Patterson used that as a tool to give us confidence prior to us doing our graveside service for Devin's birthday. So he told Darlie, and I was right there. I saw it. I saw the words come out of his mouth with my very own eyes. 100% this was said. They tested the scrapings from under her nails and they found DNA. Now, according to the trial,
now she's not telling a lie. As a matter of fact, Patterson met them all at the Home Depot before they went to the graveside. And he met them there, and he told them, "Yeah, we found DNA under the fingernails." But you got to remember, Patterson had an urn out there with a recording device on it. So, and police are allowed to lie to criminals, right? So that's why he did that. He was hoping to get her to be nervous that, oh my God, there's DNA under there, and she just didn't.
Things were never done because Darlie didn't have any length to her fingernails. She was a nail biter. That's why she wore artificial nails. She'd just taken her artificial nails off. They actually found them in one of the trash cans at
If she's a nail biter, what's she so nervous about? PTSD.
House. And it was, like the day before or 2 days before or something. She had already removed her nails, so there was nothing. But the nail beds, no actual ledge to the fingernail itself. And if they did do any kind of scrapings, they were discarded and they were never entered into evidence. And the towels that the nurses used to wipe her hands, they did put in bags, biohazard bags like you would use for your lab samples. And they saved them for the police. And the police told them, no, they didn't need them. So they were never collected by the police, although the nurses did preserve them as best they could. They were not saved and they were not ever processed. So we still do not know what DNA was found physically on Darlie's
because body. He lied to you.
Well, that just points to the intruder being in close proximity to Darlie.
And going off of that, we have to remember also that Darlie went to bed wearing underwear, panties that night.
We don't know that. We don't know Darlie went to bed wearing underwear. She said she went to bed wearing underwear. We don't know that. How do we know that? You're speculating. You're going on the word of a convicted killer.
Been found.
They even looked on the roof. They looked on Darlie's roof.
So they weren't doing any investigative stuff. They weren't really looking anywhere, but they looked on the roof. Fuck out of here, man.
They looked through trash cans. They looked through everything.
Yeah, they looked through everything. They looked everywhere. But they weren't doing a very good job of investigating, right?
What they didn't look down was the drain.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
Thank you.
They did look down the drain.
Okay.
But they didn't unlock. They didn't unlock down into the further part of the drain. They would have needed a city key to do that, and Rowlett Police did not go get the key to unlock.
Not necessarily, Anna. In my line of work, legally, we're not allowed to open manholes or things like that. But we know ways of opening them. It's not impossible to open those up. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
You're talking about the sewer ditch where the sock was found right beside. Yeah, you're right. They never checked anything beyond the superficial top surface of that.
Yeah, I think one of them climbed down there with a flashlight.
No,
somebody did.
I think.
What neighbor was that? Danelle, do you know?
They didn't climb down.
They just looked.
It was reported by some of the people in the neighborhood that one of the neighbors slid into that drainage ditch to look. But I don't know how they were even able to get in there, or if they just leaned in and looked with their head and a flashlight. That was just that's third-hand information.
That opening.
If anybody knows the answer.
I mean, I've been there. I know Anna's been there. Obviously, Danelle has been there. I can tell you this, As a matter of fact, I took Anna back there in the alleyway where that opening is. That opening is humongous.
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
mean,
say I'm
I'm-
a fairly thin person. I could probably slide down in there.
Well, I'm not so thin, and I'm 6 foot tall, and I bet I could get down there.
Yeah, I was gonna say I know I could jump down there. Yeah.
So, yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. So, next question, and we're going to be wrapping this up soon. It is Sunday. Some of us have things to do. WD-40 asked Rich, what are the chances, if any, of Darley getting justice in Texas? Well, that's the $25,000 question. I think things
Maybe a $2
are
million question.
okay. Yeah, maybe. Let's just put it this way. Chances, I think, are good.
Lucio just got justice. Robert's got justice. Depends on the case.
Of course, I'm very hopeful. I know Darley Lynn is extremely optimistic. I don't want to speak for Janelle or Dana or Darley Key, but I think they're also very optimistic.
Yes.
So I think the chances are good. Sadly, once you're in the system, it's very, very hard to get out of it, and it takes a long, long time. This has been dragging on for a long time. We're all getting very impatient with it, but think for a minute how Darley Lynn feels. I just can't begin to fathom that. I really can't. Or even how Danelle may feel. But
It's been a long ride.
it's unimaginable. But things are looking good. There's some new information that's available that looks damn good for Darley Lynn. I haven't seen anything yet that looks bad for her with what the Innocence Project is doing, which I'm real excited about. So anyway.
Rich, can I just add one more thing about the bread knife? Because
yeah, absolutely.
She just said she thinks it's the linchpin of the case, and Ellie also says that it's ridiculous. All they've got is a vacuum.
Yeah, Tracy also claims that same judge had Alzheimer's and she didn't get a fair trial because of him.
A wine glass and a bread knife. Yeah, with the bread knife, that's another good point. It was a point that was made by Darley Key in Werner Herzog when she was talking about the type of knife used to cut the screen, and she's absolutely right. It's ridiculous to think that someone would use that bread knife to cut the screen.
It would be easier to cut the screen with a serrated knife than it is with a chef's knife. Try it.
Got a round tip at the end.
Oh, there we go with the round tip. The round tip makes it easier. That's why the fiber got caught in it, because of the round tip.
Is not, if you're going to puncture it at one side and cut it across and then down the middle, you need something sharp, with a sharp edge. You wouldn't pick a bread knife, would be ridiculous weapon to choose.
Well,
she had a choice of all the other knives in the bread knife as well, maybe a smaller one with a sharper tip. Do you see what I mean? It just doesn't make sense that bread knife was used. And in addition, when they did dust the knife block, both of those knives were already removed from the slot. So they'd removed the knives. So it's possible that it could have been in the slot. Do you see what I mean? After they dusted for prints, because it could have fallen in there. It was just 1 micron.
The whole thing
with though about the bread knife, because it's ridiculous that anyone would believe that anyone would use that bread knife.
You got James Wood in the chat right now accusing Darren. Darren didn't hear this. Yeah, sure he didn't. Da-da-da. They're basically pointing fingers at Darren. He said there'd be no insulting of the family, and he allows it.
With a round tip, that's serrated, about all it's useful for is probably cutting bread.
Yeah, and that's not even always easy with those types of knives either. Let me say this to the audience, and I wish I would have recorded this, but this is years ago and I did not. And I might just do it again, and so I can record it and actually put it on here. I've actually done a test with a bread knife and a screen, and yeah, it will cut the screen.
Easier.
I've done it, but here's the issue that I have about. I agree with Tara, but here's the whole issue I have. It wasn't thoroughly investigated. Okay, they got so-called experts under oath stating that they were looking at the components that was found on the bread knife that looked similar to the components of the screen that was cut, but further testing was needed to verify it, which was never done. And I mean, you know, why not? Why didn't they do it? The test was available. And not just that, you know, when Darley got indicted, they tried saying that the screen was cut from the inside. I always found it was real interesting. Come time of trial, they changed their tone on that and admitted it was cut from the outside.
Doesn't matter.
So if the knife had been taken from that knife block, why would somebody waste the time and going outside to cut it and then come back in, running the risk of being seen, making noise? You're in the middle of the night. You're in the middle of the night, so you have no noise pollution. Even the neighbor Gorsuch across the street testified, I believe it was at 2:31 a.m., he had heard a bang that came from the direction of the Routier home. And he said he heard it clear as day, but he couldn't describe the noise. I personally, it's an assumption, but I personally believe that it was the gate that he heard, because the gate was malfunctioning at the time, because the one hinge was out. Darren had a coat hanger around it, which Darley really wanted him to get that fixed, but he was kind of farting around on that, not getting it done, which kind of irritated Darley. We don't need to go